Hello, Simon.
Hi.
Lovely to have you here. I mean, we're just talking backstage. I think I'm so pleased that you came onto my channel. I'm really thankful for it. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just wondering if everybody can hear me all right, because my earphone's just connected with my
I can hear you okay. Perhaps if people can put in chat, I'm okay. But let us know if there's any issues there.
Yeah, connected it. Yeah, it was connected. I didn't realise till your intro came on that I was actually connected to this rather than.
Oh, right. I can hear. Yeah, everyone's saying yeah, fine. That's great. That's great. Welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing okay. Yeah, we were just saying we're both in the education profession, so we're just kind of saying how nice it is to just have a bit of downtime. And I've had a couple of weeks off, so it's been nice having a mix really of going out, meeting people, having some lunches, but also having some days reading, and just taking the day as it comes. And I think that's really important. Yeah, exactly. And just not having a fixed agenda, So I've had a few of those days and a few day trips and things. And Sandra came last week, as we were just saying, which was nice.
Yeah. Oh, it's just nice to do those things, have that catch-up time. As you say, no agenda. You don't have to be at a certain place at a certain time. We live our lives by bells and timetables and being in the right place at the right time. So it's nice just to relax that a bit. So, but thank you.
No, that's fine. Thank you for having me. I was just going to say as well, there's no feeling nicer than going to bed and not having set an alarm clock.
Yeah.
It's just... I get up every morning at 5:30 and 5 at the weekends because I walk with my friend and the dogs and everything. And he's away this week. So there was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday where I've got no plans other than to read and to potter and go around town. And it was just lovely going to bed and not having set an alarm. I was like, gosh.
I tell you, I like the other end of that, of not going to bed quite so late, or going to bed later. I can actually finish that last episode of a box set and not feel guilty that I'm going to have to get up early the next morning. So I'm a bit more of a night owl than an early person. But you're right, absolutely right at that.
And Giselle said, and frequenting pubs. Absolutely, you've got to have a few little country pubs.
Well, we're here to have a bit of a natter about Pamela Colman Smith. That's the plan for tonight. So, and I'm really excited because I have to say it was your Tarot-thon 2020.
It would be, 3 years.
When you launched the Tarot-thon with the Pamela Colman Smith story, a bit of a biography about her, and I never realised just the story behind her. And ever since that time, I've sort of done a bit of research. I've been to look at other bits of art. You really got me interested in her, and so I just thought it'd be really nice a few years on to come back and revisit that and have a bit of a sort of a tribute or conversation about Pamela Colman Smith and what she means to us, and do it that way. I just thought it'd be really nice to have that.
Yeah, and I always, relish the opportunity to talk about it. But it's interesting, Richie, when you was just saying, I didn't know much about her, and that's the fascinating thing about Pixie and her life.
Yeah,
and that was what led me down that rabbit hole, because here are these iconic images that are so well known. Even if you're not in the world of tarot, you'll have seen these images at some point, I think, in your life.
Yeah.
And my first deck was the Rider pack, and it mentioned her on a little card on the inside, but her name was nowhere on the packaging. Arthur Edward Waite's name was there. So for me, it was just like, well, who is she? Who is this woman? And I was coming into the YouTube world, and I was saying to people, oh, I've got a Rider Waite deck. And people were saying, please add Smith when you talked about RWS. And I was like, Smith? As a complete greenie to it. But quite right. And then, I know we'll talk about her in much more depth as we go on. Yeah. To think that for almost 100 years, she didn't get the credit that she was due is just criminal.
It is.
And it was the same for a lot of women back then. And I love the fact now, and Stuart Kaplan, I hold him completely, you know, the person who's really brought her into the mainstream. I think it's fitting now that she's getting the accolade that she quite rightly deserves, you know?
Yeah. And it is over the course of, you said, the last 10, 15 years that it's, when I came into tarot, it was always the Rider-Waite, and it took me a little while to adjust to the RWS Rider-Waite Smith. But of course, I'm so pleased. And actually, my focus has always been on Pixie and the artwork. And as you know, her theatrical styles and life part as well is something that really interests me. And I'm just so thankful that she is getting recognition that she didn't get really in her lifetime. And that's what we're here about, again, to discuss, to make that point even stronger tonight. So
yeah, but what would this deck be without her? I mean, in full honesty, I think I flipped through it briefly once, the Pictorial Key. I don't find it the best book on tarot by any stretch. Yeah, I've got some books to share as well, but for me, it's about the images, and it's about having that. Whether we like it or not, the RWS deck is the world's most famous tarot deck.
Absolutely.
You know, by a mile, you know, and it's the most copied and reproduced. And, you know, that, I was going to say system, but tarot is the system. That tradition of tarot, the RWS tradition, you go into any tarot shop and 99% of the decks that will be in there will be RWS, inspired by Pixie.
Yeah. And our images are so iconic. You could even probably show them to people who had never heard of tarot before and would recognize something like the Hermit from the Led Zeppelin album, or the Fool. You know, the images are always around there, aren't they? And they've kind of got into our conscious in other ways, and that's exciting. And again, great that, as you say, what would the deck be without her? It's incredible.
I've just reading Chris's comment. I keep clicking on the comments, you know, thinking I'm hosting.
I'm going to do a general hello to everyone in chat, because there's so many of people having lots of lovely chats. I'm going to spend 10 minutes going. So hello to everyone in chat. It is really, really nice. If you have a question or have a comment, please put it into capitals. We'll have a go at putting that one into the chat and talking about that. So if you do want to ask a question, then go ahead, or you've got some thoughts, pop it into chat as ever. But I'm going to do a sweeping hello to everyone, and thank you for coming and being here. So lots of lovely people.
There is, yeah, lovely,
brilliant. Okay, Simon, I'm going to start off. I've got a series of questions. I don't want to ask them like a question because it's not an interview, but we both have a go at answering them. But I'm going to have to ask it as a question. So the first one is, what is it about Pamela Colman Smith, the person, that draws you into her story?
So first, as I mentioned, it was the mystery around her. She came across to me as a bit of an enigma, because there wasn't a lot back in 2016 when I found this community. There wasn't a lot. There's quite a few resources now, like the Stuart R. Kaplan book, which is packed with information. I'll show it just so while I'm talking about it. This book is incredible. You know, it's got everything about her, but there wasn't a lot written about her. But it was the fact that her character fascinated me. You know, she was described as impish, but she was gregarious, she was bohemian, she was fun-loving, mischievous. She was certainly ahead of her time. When you think about, you know, that she tried to go into publishing because she was knocked back by the men in the world of publishing, but also an incredible amount of talent. You know, she wasn't just an artist. She was a set designer. She was a costume designer, an illustrator. She just had a publisher, so many strings to her bow. And she was somebody that was very resilient and had a very tough life. You know, when you think about right from the beginning, you know, the fact she was born in 1878 in Pimlico, London, so she had a very affluent start to life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Her parents were very wealthy, that's well documented. But she lost them very young. You know, she was 15 when was it 15 when her mum died, and 18 when her father, no, 18 when her mum died, 21 when her father died. And then she had to fend for herself, basically. She was only able to afford the house at Lizard because an uncle left her some money some years later.
Yeah.
But she was a jobbing, you know, actor, artist in London. But she made some fantastic connections, and that was another aspect about her that I really liked. The fact that, you know, she counted Ellen Terry amongst her friends, who gave her the nickname Pixie.
Yeah.
Bram Stoker, Henry Irving, all of these greats at the time.
All these big Victorian impresarios and the elite of the theatrical world, you know.
And then I would read about the parties that she would throw. You know, she would throw them and invite all these people around that are, you know, quite arty and bohemian, and she just enjoyed life. But she had a fascinating journey from, you know, she went to live in Jamaica when she was a child, and there's a lot of what's the word, kind of things that were rumored but never proven. So was she a woman of color? There's no proof anywhere. I think people like to think that she was, but she spoke with a Jamaican accent because she spent quite a lot of her young years in Jamaica. Was she a member of the LGBT community? You know, she never married. She had a companion that she lived with right until her death, who she left her estate to. She never got anything, of course, because there was nothing by the time the debts were settled. But there's still, even though we start to find out more things about Pixie, we're only scratching the surface, because there's things that we'll never know. And I've been in groups where it's got quite fraught in the comments, because, you know, people are insisting she was a woman of color. And there were some written accounts where, very negatively written actually, where, you know, there was quite rude comments made about her, because while she was quite popular within her circle, I think some people found her quite annoying. You know, this impish woman who, you know, well, I won't even say the words that were used about her, but it was defamatory anyway. So yeah, she's still a person of mystery, but an incredibly talented woman, ahead of her time. She was a suffragette, and she affiliated herself with the suffrage movement, and just the fact that she kind of tried to open doors for women as well, particularly in the publishing industry. You know, when she got that knockback, most people back in the day would have given up. But she didn't. She was like, she wrote a letter to a relative once saying, these pigs, these men that are pigs, you know, who are, you know, trying to shut me down. And so she decided to publish her own work, you know, which it is incredible. So I guess the answer, very long-winded, I apologize, is first the mystery about who this woman is, because I love this deck and I want to know more about the creator of it, certainly the illustrator of it. But then the more you dig and the more you find out how fascinating her life was, there's still a lot of unknowns about her. There's still a lot of mystery surrounding her, even so much as, where is she buried?
Exactly.
You know, because a fire destroyed the records, I think in the 1960s. And we know she went into an unmarked pauper's grave. So therefore, when the records was destroyed, there was no way to know even where she's buried. Again, a travesty.
Yeah, I believe the church has got a plaque up on the wall to say she's buried somewhere in the graveyard, but that's all there is. And incredible. But in many ways, what her final resting place is just kind of typical of her kind of life, where she was a little bit of an enigma, a little bit of everything. That's what I get from her, and what excites me about Pamela Colman Smith and gets drawn to is her theatricality, the fact, as we talked about, she mixes in circles. But then she changes. One moment she's with the Golden Dawn, and then, at the end of her life, she becomes Catholic, I believe, doesn't she? She's always changing and adapting for her better self, not because other people make her do that. It's always feels that she's the one calling the shots on this one, and being very strong at a time when it must have been quite difficult, as we've suggested, to get into the publishing world, to get into the art world, when it was so male orientated and patriarchal in that way. So I just love this fact that she's such an enigma, and as you say, we'll never probably understand it all, but that's what makes it all so perfect. And in many ways, she's hidden clues to it in this, perhaps, and that's the only way that we will get the closest to her, is by using her cards. So I love it, absolutely love it.
And her works, because that was the journey I went on as well. I heard about the Anansi stories, so I went digging around, and then I found a publication of the Anansi stories, and the illustrations in here are fantastic. So you really get to see, because this is what she was known for a lot, was her illustration. So when she was in the theatre, what we would now call programs, she would do all the illustrations for them and work in the theatre that way. So, but you can really see her art style coming through. And she would do these one-woman shows, where she'd sit on the side of the stage and have a little cardboard cutouts of characters, and she would use the Jamaican accent and retell these. It's not, excuse me, it's not the easiest book to read, because of the dialect that's used in the book. But once you get past that and get into another great stories, and she used to love to retell the stories that she learned while she was in Jamaica, to the audiences over here and in New York. So
I'm just Tim asked what the book, the Pictorial Key to the Tarot, Arthur Edward Waite, there on that one there. It's available. I mean, this is a copy I picked up in a second hand. I think it's available in on Kindle, and probably you can get it in most places. I think
you can also get it in the Pamela Colman Smith commemorative set.
Yeah.
So I think this is still available.
Yes.
This was released in 2009 to mark, obviously, the 100 years since the first printing, the Roses and Lilies deck. And the great thing about this, it opens up in this set, and you've got your deck on this side, and they did a fantastic job in terms of, it's got that sort of antique-y look to it. But in this set, you get a couple of books, and one is the Pictorial Key.
Isn't there?
Why it's called the Pictorial Key, I'll never know. There's one picture of a cup there. And then there's this little book, which was kind of like the precursor, really, for the big book I've just shown. And this is the artwork and times of Pamela Colman Smith, because the big book does her life, but it's only like a third of the way through. And then the rest of it is about her art.
Yeah.
And this book is a gem for looking at all her art styles and where it was used. And then you get some gorgeous postcards as well. Some are kind of like a postcard size, like these, but you get some nice big ones as well, which are beautiful. So it's a really nice set if anybody can still get it. I know you can get it as a separate deck, but to get
I just found out yesterday, talking to Sandra, that I didn't realize they did a borderless version of that.
Yes,
it's lovely.
Yeah, which was controversial at the time because they had to add artwork to it,
right,
to get it to fit, and the perspective of removing the borders. They didn't expand it out. They added So when you look at something like the Magician card, the kind of floral bough that is above is just suspended in midair.
Yeah.
And then other bits they've had to add on. So people are like, actually, it's not really
not quite the same.
Yeah.
It's like when they restore old films and put them back into the original 16:9, and you can sometimes see like the props man's hands in the background and things like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, typical. Yeah. MA says, my great grandmother born right about the same time as Pixie. Their lives could have not been more different. Oh. And Patrice,
Wow.
hello, Patrice says,
Hi, Patrice.
Visionary. So absolutely. Beth is asking a question. I don't know if you can answer this, Simon. Did Pixie ever spend time in Paris?
Not that I'm aware of. I haven't read anywhere that she did. She could have done. There's not a lot written about her life after the Golden Dawn, other than her conversion to Catholicism, which only came 3 years after the first tarot deck in 1912.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of it is speculation. And I found that when I did do the Tarothon piece in 2020, people have very strong opinions and will come at you and say, you know, and all I can do is reference the sources that I've read. Doesn't mean that they're right, you know, because again, she's a woman. There's a lot of mystery around her. But there wasn't a lot. We know that she converted to Catholicism. We know that she got some money, and she moved to Lizard, imbued. Uncle Teddy was the person that left her some money, and she built her own church there, which was Our Lady of the Lizard. And she used to allow clergy. Did they call them clergy in the Catholic tradition? But you know, priests. To stay as well. She would board them, and they would preach from that chapel that she built on her own land, and it looks picturesque. I want to go and see that.
I nearly went, and then I got stuck behind a tractor for 3 hours, as you do in Cornwall around that area, and it just meant that we didn't get there in the end. We had somewhere else to go. So next time. But it does look absolutely beautiful. Beth also asked another question. Do you know why she converted to Catholicism?
Yeah, again, it's only a belief, but she joined the Urania temple. What was it? The Isis Urania temple of the Golden Dawn. Arthur Edward Waite didn't really, after a period of time, like that order, and formed his own. And when he formed his own, he wanted it to have more of a Christian influence.
Right.
And it was the Rosicrucian, and she followed him to that.
Okay.
So it's believed that because she was then getting lots of kind of Christian influence through this order that Arthur Edward Waite started, that she then just naturally went into Catholicism. But the church was big at the time.
Yeah.
You know, it was a huge organization. It still is, but particularly at that time.
Giselle says, I'm curious, does Simon follow RWS more, or is it Pixie as an artist and life the bigger draw?
That's a really good question. I think I'm going to be careful when I say this. Sometimes I see a deck and my eyes roll, because I think, oh gosh, it's another deck that's coming out that's trying to find a different way to recreate the RWS imagery. How many cat tarots can we have? How many dog tarots, Christmas tarots? You name it. There's probably a tarot deck for it. And they tend to, in the main, follow the RWS. So for me, and I've said many times, if there was only ever one tarot deck and it was this one, then this would be it. The RWS is my sole deck. I don't need any other deck. I like having them because I like seeing, artist interpretations and things like that. And I enjoy some Marseille decks, but for me, it's the kind of the royal standard, if you like, is Pixie's artwork.
Yeah.
And I've talked a lot at the moment about the Retina Waite Smith which is redrawn by the guys over at Destiny, and I love that. I love the quality of it. But it's redrawn exactly. You know, I've looked at it, studied side by side, and thinking, Uma Singh Poonfat, who was the artist for that deck, it's incredible. You know, and all he's really done is cleaned up the line work, but he's recreated it almost exact. So
that's incredible.
I think it's a real homage to her.
Yes, and in a way, I hope it stops things like these versions of these, which are just so blurry. The mass market that you can pick up in most shops now, and you know, and goes under. I just hate this deck because of the colours of it. It's just, you know, tepid. It's like the tea stained, and so hopefully, you know, as these new decks come in that have been cleaned up and digitalised, but faithfully, it might stop some of these getting out, because I do have a bit of a problem with those ones. I think it was the first copy I got of an RWS, and I looked at it and I went, this isn't the colourful ones that I saw on the internet, and this isn't the one that's inspiring me. So,
and it upsets me a little bit, because you know that the rider pack is the one that if you went into WH Smith and said, do you sell the tarot, they'll push that one to you. And it's the one I bought in 2008. And I remember, you know, getting that and the Tarot Bible, and the pictures didn't match up because the other one follows Universal, and just thinking, oh, it's a bit blotchy, it's a bit, you know, and it wasn't again until I found the online community and people were talking about RWS, and I've seen some of these beautiful images. I think the first one I saw was the Radiant.
Yes.
And I bought the Radiant and thought, wow, you know, what a difference.
Exactly,
So,
what a difference. It's incredible. So it's one of my favourites there. Thank you. I think that's answered your question there, Giselle.
Ren just had one about what Robert M. Place book, Ren, did you... She was just saying she's read a bit about Pixie and Robert M. Place's book, but she's a Marseille person. Be interested. I didn't know he'd written about her. I've only ever read one of his books. I've got a lot of his decks, but I've only ever read one of his books.
Great. And Tim has asked, can we touch upon the ABC? We're going to later, so stay tuned.
That's really going to frazzle my brain.
We're doing that bit towards the end. I promise you it's coming. Okay. Yeah, Debbie said my Pam vintage deck's got extra bunch of cards of Pam's artwork. Yeah, it's really nice to see those extra cards in there.
It is, and there's an image. Sorry, Richie. There's an image that Conrad Stain always puts in with his CS tarot, and I absolutely love it. It's one of my, see if I can find it quickly. It's one of my favorites. This one. It's one of my favorite art pieces of Pamela Colman Smith. Can you see that? I might need to make it a little bit darker so you can see it. But it's absolutely gorgeous. But it's very kind of 2 of 1s ish at the top. But this beautiful. She drew a lot of faces in mountains or in waves. And her art style is very, is it ukiyo? Is that how you say it? But the Japanese art style, very sort of flat with flat colours. And then at the bottom, you can see these people also looking up at this huge sculpture. But I just think this is a gorgeous. I'd love to get the original, but that's not going to happen. But a nice poster of it to frame, because I think it's gorgeous. But another one where it's, you know, where there's mountains and things, where just stunning, and water.
It's beautiful work. I went to Ellen Terrace House, which is in Kent.
Did you?
Yeah, it's wonderful. I'm going to go back again. I think I made a video in my thing about it. And it's a really old house with very rickety floors and everything. But she's got a small room that's a library. And in the library, there are some original Pamela Colman Smith notebooks and art books. But sadly, they were all locked away. And I was like, I just want to have a look at them. And as the man in the room said, no. But I'm hoping one day that they might see the light of day and go in an exhibition or something like that would be good. But so, you know, it was just there out of reach. It was a shame. But yeah.
I think once the recognition comes, and I don't know if you're aware, but Susan Wands, who wrote the Magician and Fool, and has got a second book coming out. Is it The High Priest and Empress or something like that? She's put in the application process for the blue plaque for Pixie's birthplace, and the whole thing takes about a year before you even get a decision because of how many requests there are. But if she is successful, then I think again that profile is highlighted more about who she is, and other things then little avenues start to open up, don't they?
Yeah. Right, next topic of conversation, and if we don't want to talk about this, you can feel free to move on, Simon. It's I was thinking we've been talking, celebrating Pixie, so therefore perhaps it's a little bit easier, and I'm going to use this word carefully, to malign Arthur Waite. What's your thoughts about Mr. Waite?
I don't put him on the same level as Aleister Crowley. But he was a misogynist. From all the kind of readings I've done about him. I don't think he gave her due, obviously. No. And in her own words, she described creating the tarot as a very big job for very little money. And you could say, well, that's how it was at the time. But if there's a person out there who's creating their own kind of order, then I think he could have been a lot fairer to her. And he had an opportunity there, So from all accounts, he was a misogynist and he wasn't a pleasant person. However, he did allow her to have I wouldn't say free reign, but a lot more kind of freedom when it came to the minors, because and we know she drew inspiration from the Solar Busca, but there was no template there because we'd only had pit decks before that. So he was very kind of dictatorial when it came to the majors of what he wanted representing. But when it came to the minors, I find it fascinating that he then allowed her. It was almost like that's out of his depth, his comfort area. So he can have a little bit of freedom.
Because I'm not quite.
So he obviously valued her, but he didn't value her enough to give her the credit that she deserved. That's how I kind of view him.
I'm much the same. I don't actually know very much about him, and certainly I'm picking this one up again. This tome doesn't make me want to read it, apart from looking at the pretty, which has actually got color prints. This has actually got quite nice color prints in there. That's the only reason I'm going to pick it up and look at it. Yes, we have to say, yes, the man was partial to, to creating all of this, but I think I'm on Pixie's side, and I don't really want to know too much about Arthur Waite because, as you say, what comes across is not very nice.
No, exactly. And in the last few years, particularly probably in the last 5 years or so, we've started to see her really front and foremost. So we're getting decks now that are called the Pamela Colman Smith Tarot. Most publishers are recognizing her in some way and putting the Smith in there. It's just a shame she never saw it in her lifetime.
Exactly. Okay. How has Pixie's artwork influenced how you read and interpret the cards?
I think if you learn from a particular deck, whatever that deck is, then that's the basis of your underpinning knowledge, if that makes sense.
No,
so it could be argued that if I picked up a Toth deck, and I love the images. I don't know why I don't. I just can't connect with them. They leave me feeling a little bit cold. But then Lady Frida Harris, I would really sort of, you know, I'd be again fascinated. Oh, I wonder why she depicted that in that way. But I suppose because, I mean, my first deck was one JJ Swiss 30 odd years ago. But I'd never read with the minors because they just look like patterns to me and I couldn't make head and tail of them.
No.
But, you know, since picking up the RWS and learning to read, she depicts the images in such a way that I found it was the best way to learn, because I am a visual person. You know, my learning style is very visual. And if I see, I mean, you only have to get this deck and lay down 6 or 7 cards in a line, and you can form a story.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think to learn the tarot that way, and don't worry at the beginning whether it's right or wrong. You know, that really helps. So whether it's just because this was the deck, a fully illustrated deck, that's why I found it quite easy to learn the tarot. Can I credit that to her? Yes, because she was the first person to do a full illustrated tarot deck. But for me, it's because she creates the archetype of that card in such a way that I found it quite easy to understand the message of it.
Yeah, I totally agree with exactly what you said there. That archetype, it's there. You almost don't need the book to actually start to worry about interpreting it. You could pick up the cards from a good production of it and work with them pretty much straight away if you're going intuitively on those ones. And as you say, they're very much almost setting them up like little, I'm not going to say cartoon strip, but you've got that element there that's going on with it. I also like the kind of fantasy world that she creates, and yet it's not a fantasy world, if that makes sense. You know, we see castles and buildings in the background going on, but they're quite realistic in the way that they've been drawn. It's not like we're going into some period of medieval history. We're in the world of Arthurian legends in many ways, and it hasn't got that specific time zone that dates it. And that's what makes it so magical, is that this card could have been, you know, was drawn in early 1909 or whatever it was, but could have been drawn 500 years before that, or could easily be in a modern day storybook as an illustration. It's just absolutely timeless.
It is. And when you think as well, I think it was you, wasn't it, Richie, who on the same Tarathon talked about set design and how the images lend themselves. If you think about her world as well, coming up through the theatre, the world of theatre, then you work on the experience that you've gained. You know, Ren mentioned in the comments the short period of time. She did 80 cards, and I'd love to know what the 80th one is. I don't know what it is before somebody asks me, but she apparently did 80 cards in 6 months. So this is 80 paintings in 6 months, which is phenomenal. You ask somebody today to create a tarot deck in 6 months without using any digital interventions, then we'd be asking a lot. But she did that. So we know that she used the Japanese ukiyo style because that would be the fastest and the quickest way to do it on the time constraints that she'd got. But she's also going to draw on her experience because she, you know, and that's why you see the castles in the background. If you imagine going to see a play, and someone's designed the backdrop, you know, you're going to see castles in the distance and pathways and everything else. So I think that's why. But you're right, it is timeless. And I don't think, you know, if nobody knew anything about it and they picked this deck up and said, right, age this deck, when do you think this deck was created? Would they go 1909, or would they go older? Or newer? You know, it's just.
It'd be really interesting to ask that question to somebody that didn't know much. I would think they would go older, to be honest with you.
I do. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. We have to try that one day on somebody.
Some poor
Pick up with
unsuspecting
some
person.
comments. Beth says, I'm a huge fan of Pixie because I think she was a genius at creating cards that are both very dramatic and also subtle, amazing. Yeah, there's both in that, isn't there? That if you look at the some of the cards, like the Four of Cups, I think is quite a card. Just look at it and just go, that's really interesting. There is absolute subtlety in most of the artwork. Some of them perhaps not quite so. But even, you know, if you take the card like the Tower or something like that at all, she could have gone full tilt on horror and destruction on it. But it's done in such a stylized way that although it's shocking, it doesn't necessarily frighten.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to go with that. I'm just catching up with people's comments here. People are making some lovely comments. That's how I understand it. She didn't have control over a lot of the creativity, at least with the minors, since she didn't care so much about those, and, you know, the time constraint. Yeah. And Hershey says, I've been reading the Dictionary of the Tarot by Bill Butler. I don't know that one. And it's full of good information from many different sources and views. Sorry, Simon.
Giselle asked a question a little bit earlier on as well, saying that she's got the Centennial, and I can't remember the other one that she said she'd got, but if she was to get an RWS deck again, which one would I recommend?
Yes.
I think the Centennial is a fantastic deck, actually, and that's the one I tend to buy for people who are asking me about the tarot. Either that or the Los Carabeo 1909. But we've now got the decks on NPC, which is the Roses and Lilies and the Pame B, C, D. So I would say, because you don't have any copyright or anything, that's the only thing about the Centennial, this annoying copyright on the front of every card. I would say to Giselle, go to NPC and Conrad Stain's shop and probably get the Roses and Lilies or the Pame, because I think those two are they're certainly my favourites.
I suppose that brings us to the point, doesn't it, quite nicely, where we have, as Tim asked earlier, can we touch on the Pame B, C, D decks? And I asked you about this, Simon, because I said I've watched your video several times, and although it makes perfect sense, I still get very confused by the order, the dates, and the differences. So I'm going to ask you if you could, in a short amount of time, have a go at explaining the differences between them.
Okay.
I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Is that all right? I'm going to take myself out of the picture. Is that all right? But you've got me, so let's swap you over so that you are there now.
Okay. So the first thing to think about is it's natural to think that the order goes Roses and Lilies, Pam A, Pam B, Pam C, Pam D, but it doesn't. So you just have to kind of get rid of that. The first deck, which is the Roses and Lilies. Now this is available on NPC, the ones I was talking about. What Conrad's done is try to replicate the style of the box as well. So you're getting like an experience. You can get thicker decks as well, which I did as backups, because particularly when it came to the Pame, it was a lot thicker. So the first one is the one that has the Roses and Lilies backs. Okay. And this was released towards the end of 1909, and it was the first deck, the first RWS deck. However, there was I don't think I was happy for it. And again, you know, different sources cite different things. Well, apparently there was an issue with the card stock, and it wasn't taken off. So in 1910, excuse me, 1910, we had the Pame. Okay. And these are named after the plates of where the images, and lots of them have been destroyed in the Second World War and stuff like that. But that had the crackleback version. Now, the Pame had better cardstock. So Esther over at Mindful Tarot has a Pame, and she said, if we imagine the first Wild Unknown deck, it's that sort of thickness. So it was a lot thicker than the original. Now I think this is my favorite version, and Conrad has taken scans from, I think, Saskia Jensen for the Roses and Lilies 1909 and Kenji for the Pam decks, because he owns them, and they both gave consent for him to do that when he shared the files and said, this is however we created them. Are you happy? Do you think it's a likeness? And they said it's as much of a likeness as you're going to get. So they was happy to sign that off. So Pam A was the second edition, and it was released in April of putting the thick deck back in the wrong box. Pop that out of the way. Pam A was the second edition, and it was released in April of 1910. So just again another 6 or 7 months after the Roses and Lilies, and that was around till about 1920. So a good 10 years. Okay. So then you would think, well, then the Pam B would be next.
Yes.
Well, the Pam B is actually the youngest of the decks, and this wasn't released until 1931, which went until 1940. Okay, which is the last printing of these decks. So Pam C. Now this is where it gets confusing. Pam C was also published in 1920.
Right.
But stopped being published in 1928. So Pam C, 1920 to 1928. Pam B, 1920. See, I'm getting confused now. Pam C, sorry, was Pam B is the youngest. Pam C and Pam D both were printed at the same time. That's right. It. I'm back on track.
Good.
So 1920, there was both published, but Pam C only made it to 1928. Pam D, also from 1920, made it to 1931. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then Pam B, the youngest deck, comes in at 1931 to 1940. So it's how Doctor Who David Tennant said, it's a bit of a big ball of wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. Yeah. So the way it goes really is you've got your Roses and Lilies, 1909, 1910 Pam A, and then you've got C and D together, which is 1920 to 1928 and 1931, and then Pam B comes in 1931 to 1940.
Got it.
Okay.
Lovely.
And these are all cracklebacks. So the Pam A, B, C, D are all cracklebacks. This one is quite blotchy as well, the B, the youngest. And I think that's why we see a lot of blotchy decks now. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm going to bring us back to both on screen now. Thank you, Simon. That was. I'm going to keep us that way round. If that's okay, I won't move us around you on that side. Lovely. You can understand why it's confusing.
Yeah, it's just confusing that A is the beginning after Roses and Lilies, and B is the last, and then having the C and D at the same time. For 8 of those years the same time, but one continues a little bit longer than the other. And why? Why was there 2 different ones after the Pam A? Why do we have C and D? So great history lesson. Richard, can I just grab some more cold drink? Is that all right? Can we throw it a little bit?
Off if you
need
to.
Me a second.
Lovely. I'm just going to go through a few comments here. MA says, sometimes I wish I could start all over and relive opening my first deck for the first time. Anyone else? Yeah, absolutely. I love it when
when somebody shows an interest in tarot, somebody said to me a few weeks ago, would you teach me the tarot? And the part of you just thinks, oh gosh, you know, that's a big thing. Teach you the tarot. I can give you the basics, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then they said, could you advise me what deck to get? But there's some on the market, and I looked on this particular market stall, and they're all cheap, horrible. And I was like, no, I'll give you a deck as part of your first class, you know. But then I always think, oh, that's such a, I love it when people are just starting out on their tarot journey.
Yeah.
Because it is interesting and exciting.
It is. And also nowadays, I mean, you and I were sort of into tarot perhaps about the same time. There wasn't the biggest selection that obviously there is nowadays, you know, and we had a choice of about 4 or 5 decks that you could possibly get in one go. So the choice now would be so exciting. And I wonder, you know, perhaps I would have gone for a different system. I don't know if it was now. It's there's so much choice out there. Perhaps too much choice. I don't know. That's a bit controversial, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and it's a question I get asked a lot, actually. It's like, particularly around RWS, you know, there is a proliferation of her work. And people have said to me, how do you think she'd feel about it? And who knows how she'd feel about it, you know, but the kind of overriding thing for me is I think she'd be pleased that her work has lived on.
Yes.
You know, and we wouldn't know. And it talks about it in the book that actually by the time she passed away, she wasn't known.
No,
she wasn't known. Her work had, you know, stopped being exhibited.
Yeah.
She was broke.
Yeah.
There was a whole year of her life towards the end where she didn't earn a single penny.
Yeah.
And then you think of how tough, you know, life was like after the war, you know, what that would have been like for her. So I do think that, and then again, people are saying she converted to Catholicism. Do you think she'd want this? But I think, you know, had it not been for the tarot, then we wouldn't know about her other works as well. So, you know, it's swings and roundabouts.
In time and history, wouldn't she? Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Giselle says, thank you, sweetie. Perhaps you can help me navigate that in November.
I will.
And hello, Calla says, there are so many decks. I stopped buying them for a bit. I need a bit of a breather. Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
I get that.
Yeah, yeah.
And while you're having that breather, Calla, just take out your favorite deck. Take out the one that speaks to you at the moment, take it out and just work with that deck, you know. And then if you feel inspired at some point in the future to buy another, great. And if you don't, doesn't matter. All you need is the one, your one deck.
It's interesting having this conversation. I've gone through some of my RWS versions, and recently I've got back into them, and I've seemed to have added to it. I really like the you know, the Tarot magazine. Yeah. And they did, I think their first edition was the Radiant Wise one, and it's a really lovely version of it. I don't know if it's my camera's picking it up.
Isn't it what we call the Dirty Palm? Was it in issue 1 and 2?
Radiant Wise Spirit, yeah. And I was so lucky to have got this one. Yeah, I'm so lucky to have come across this one. I wasn't expecting the magazine decks to be as good as they were, and I was just really impressed that they brought this one out as the first deck, and I've been using it quite a lot, and I really like the coloration on it.
Yeah, well, this deck in particular, I mean, the only thing about it, I wish it had got Pixie's calligraphy, but this deck came out probably about 2017, I think it was, and I loved it, and I talked about it a lot on my channel, and a lot of people were sort of like, yeah. And then they just switched it. Los Scarabeo carried on selling the Pamela Colman Smith deck, as what it was called.
Yeah.
But just went back to a 1909 version. And then everybody was up in uproar saying, how do I get the one with the dramatic colours?
Yeah.
And then, of course, they brought out the Radiant, which was big and glossy. But then they brought out the mini version. And in the mini version, they've gone back to this bordered you know, silky kind of cardstock. So everybody was like, "Oh, does this mean that they're going to reprint it?" And they did, but it was part of Totally Tarot.
Yeah.
So when Totally Tarot came out, I think I bought 3 copies for the first couple of weeks just
Well,
to get 3 versions of this deck,
very
you know,
reasonable,
because it's
yeah.
so
Yeah.
sought after,
Yeah.
and you could get it for a tenner.
Yeah, bargain. I still love the big Radiant Wise borderless. I was gifted this one, and I think this might have been my first, I'm going to say, decent Pamela Colman Smith, because I don't class this one that we talked about earlier as a decent version of it. And again, I just love the colours on this one, and it being the borderless, just bigger cardstock. It really speaks to me on that one there. So that's one of my favourites, and I do like the Radiant Rider-Waite as well, which I think we mentioned earlier.
Giselle said, "I'm now on the left. Have I had one glass of wine too many?"
I'm more used to you being on the left side. And that's the thing. I
didn't even notice.
I'm not going to mix people up now. It's fine.
Yeah, the Radiant is really nice.
This is a really nice, cheerful version of it. If you're feeling a little bit like you need to cheer up, this one, I think, is the one I reach for on that one.
The universal weights as well. I overlooked that for a lot of years. And I did on the cup catch up a couple of weeks ago, I revisited my top 10 RWS decks, and I included it in there because it's just one that it's so soft and lovely, but and it's by Mary Hanson Roberts, as in, you know, who's coloured it using Pixie's limeware. But that's really nice as well, and it doesn't get a lot of exposure at the moment. It seems to be one that's forgotten about a bit.
Have to bring it back. I also like, having gone through my collection today, the only one I particularly like from the Neo Rider is this one. I can't remember the title of that one there.
Yes, that's the one with the lovely cardstock, isn't it?
It's fantastic cardstock. You could,
and the gilding is luscious. It's sparkly, but matte.
Yeah, yes. And although it's kind of black embossed, it does have like a rainbow sheen in it if you can catch it in the right light. But I think it really does the artwork incredibly well to see it in that style. I have to say the other decks aren't my favorite because some of them are made of plastic and it's a bit like shuffling fish. They do tend to end up all over the floor, but this one shuffles really, really well.
Well, this one, I can't remember because I forget. She never put the names on the boxes, did she?
No, I can't remember.
But this one is really nice. It's got the same design on the back, kind of like a metallic, gold gilding on the edges. But again, it's got like mustard coloured backgrounds, but it's nice and clean. Yeah. And I think it's been redrawn, but it is really nice.
Yeah.
But I don't use it as nearly as much as I should. But it's got that beautiful matte cardstock, very buttery. But the colours are lovely in this.
Yeah. Excuse me. Beth says I use the Radiant in the warm months and Sasha Graham's Tarot Vintage in the cold ones. Yeah, I tried to pick up the Tarot Vintage the other day. Still don't have that one yet, but this kind of feels enough for me on that one there.
I think the colour of this sea, this purple,
oh, beautiful
sea behind her is really nice,
really rich.
Yeah. The colours in this are gorgeous. It's a really nice deck. I think at first I was all about with the Neo Riders. I was like, oh, the blingy, plasticky ones, so beautiful. I've never seen anything like it. Yeah. Well, actually, this one is one that I think is one I probably use the most. Carol Hertzer.
So I could have a coffee with you, gentlemen. Oh, that's nice.
Who said that?
Tim Newell.
I'll try and squeeze it in. Yeah, so Giselle just mentioned the Carol Hertzer deck. Have you I brought it. You had a look
Yeah,
at it.
I was allowed to look through that in Glastonbury. I loved it. Yeah.
Let me grab it.
Go grab it.
Yeah, so I asked Carol if I could have a thicker version because my first one that I sold was paper thin. Boy, did she go for a thick, thick version! But she even paints the backs. But this is stunning. It's gorgeous.
So is that a deck that's been painted on top of, or is all the artwork original?
Yeah, so it's the line work is Pamela Colman Smith, and Carol Hertz has painted them.
Wow.
But she uses lots of, and you can spend hundreds because she does some with glitter and also neon paints. But it's a beautiful deck. It wasn't cheap, and I got this and the Starlight, but I got them in trades. So I traded with Jessie Driscoll. She wanted a deck. She lived in the same town as Carol, so she went around and picked it up, and we traded. But it was over £100 for this.
Yeah.
But you know, it's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Well,
and the Starlight one was
the
not.
cost of decks, especially on Kickstarter, that's most of them are getting on for that when you add in the postage and packing. So nowadays, that's a bit of a bargain, perhaps, Simon.
Yeah, that's right. The more and more decks that we're seeing that are edging up to that sort of price range. Even mass market ones are now kind of at the price point where indie was just a couple of years ago. Look at the sky on that one, really beautiful. So yeah, that's the Illuminated Tarot by Carol Hertz, and then I've got the Starlight as well.
And so I'm going to ask about books. What books would you recommend, or do you think work very well with Pamela's original deck?
So I've got a couple of books.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it depends on people's learning styles. Because there's one I'm going to mention. This one, the Queen of Wands, which is comic book style. What do you call it? Graphic novel. Yeah. But actually, it covers the bit in 1889 where she joins the suffragette movement, and it takes you through her life. But it's by Cat Willett. But it's really easy to read, and you only need an hour or so to sit with this book and read it. That's a couple of hours. But yeah, it's fantastic. And for an illustrated book, again, if you haven't got time and you just want the main points, as I mentioned earlier, Pamela Colman Smith, The Untold Story, fantastic research. And even that was by the late Stuart R. Kaplan, contributions from Mary K. Greer, Elizabeth Foley O'Connor, and Melinda Boyd Parsons. But this is just delicious. It's everything. So much in here, and it's got all her artwork and everything in it. It's a really comprehensive guide to not just her life story, but to her work. So a bit of an investment. They have it in Watkins. I think you can order direct. Might even have it on Amazon, actually. The one that I didn't enjoy that much was the Pious Pixie, which is Dawn R. Robinson. It's quite a difficult read. Wasn't the easiest, and it took me a while. And again, it's all kind of supposed. So you've got like here, Ellen Terry, surrogate mother, ? So talks about the relationships. I only got to, there's an art card as well that Conrad put in. I only got to page 165 and I gave up on it. I was like, not enjoying it. But if you're the sort of learner as well that enjoys story, then I really recommend The Magician and Fool as well by Susan Wands, because this is a novel, and I interviewed Susan. She's done so much work into learning about the history of Pamela Colman Smith.
Yeah.
So she's put it into a story format. So it's like reading a novel.
Yeah.
And I was getting right near the end, and I was like, we haven't even got to the bit about the tarot yet. I've only got a few pages left. And then when I turned the last page and saw that this was going to be a series, there's more to come. But this talks about her relationship toward the end of the book with Arthur Edward Waite, but also her relationship with Aleister Crowley, and how he was with her. And he was quite monstrous, really. But it starts off, going through her life. Something else that's really interesting about Pamela Colman Smith is she had a condition called synesthesia, which meant that's where one sense will trigger another sense. So Kelly Bear has it, and it's quite fascinating. With Kelly, if she's working with fabrics and there's beautiful colours, she'll start salivating because she can taste the colours. But for Pixie, it was music to colours and form. So if she put music on, she could illustrate because the music, she would see colours, shapes, and things like that. So she had synesthesia, which is quite a rare condition, but it's where one sense triggers another. So it goes through all that as well. And I loved reading this. I need to see if the new book is out, actually, the second one, because I need to get that and read it. Because Giselle was asking if that deck's still available. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. Which deck?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure which one.
Which one, Giselle? Which one?
WTF is Tarot is still available. It's not a book about Pixie. It's Backrell Whitner. I love that book, but
it's really good.
I really got my head around the court cards reading that book, where she put it into like a family unit and the type of family, like what the Pentacles family would look like, and I just loved her. And each card had a little anecdote from her life as well that linked to the card.
I got this for Christmas, actually. It came in a box set. I'll show you the box. It's great. It comes like that. And it's Stephanie Capone. And it comes firstly with a really lovely version. And I don't know what version this is, but actually it's very, very nice. Let's have a look. Much better than the ones I was showing you earlier.
So the cardstock quite good as well.
It's not brilliant, but it'll do. It'll do. But the colours in it are really fantastic. And the book is really good as well. Really thick. It's got 235 pages. And it's very simple, just with some keywords there. Numerology, astrology, reverse and uprights. And then you've got your career, your love, romance, personal, spiritual, general meaning, and the reversed. And it's a really good. And what I really like about this book is it starts off by talking about spreads and getting people who are, new to tarot, just getting in the idea about spreads. And actually, it shows the Celtic cross is two ways in there. And I actually always struggled a bit with the Celtic cross, so it's really useful to unpick from that. So it comes as a pack. I can't remember how much it was. But if somebody's starting off in tarot, I really recommend that. And that's available on Amazon. So there you go. There's a bit of a plug there. So that's the book I would recommend.
That's good. I'll have to look that set up.
Yeah.
And just to answer Beth's, what I did, Beth, I didn't realise it was a Pentagram publishing deck that you was referring to. But yes, I do remember that I've got it. It's a beautiful deck. It's one with the ink work. Dot in work,
That's it, the Ukrainian RWS. Yeah. Oh, okay. So, Simon, I think we've gone past the hour, and that's been. I reckon we could probably talk for another hour quite easily on this one.
I think we could.
But I can hear that your voice. You're struggling a little bit there.
Oh, it's okay. It's.
So I'll give you a little bit the night off for that one there. But have you got coffee and catch up tomorrow?
Yes, yeah. All being well, I can't see any reason why not. So, yeah, I'll be on tomorrow for a cuppa with people on my channel. So yeah, but no, thank you for having me. I always love talking about Pixie, you know, because she's just fascinating. And I just hope the next step in her journey is that blue plaque and she gets some recognition. And Susan said if she does, if it is a go, you know, we'll all go down to London and be there for that. I think that'll be a very special and quite an emotional moment, I think, you know, to see her being recognised. So
is there any way we can follow the progress of this blue plaque at all? Do you know? Or
I think and I'll message Susan. The last thing she said to me was that it's a very long process.
Yeah.
But they'd got through the stage of which they hadn't previously, and you can only apply every so often.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't get through this time, I think it's another 5-10 years, something like that.
Yeah.
That it's in the system now, you know, and then obviously it's got to be a panel decision as to whether she's worthy enough to have a blue plaque. And I kind of wished I'd known about the campaign before, because I would have done everything I could to get more signatures, you know, because they needed so many signatures and they got them. But I think we could have significantly increased on that.
It all goes to the panel now, I think, for them to look at the cases and do things over. I do happen to know, well, a few years ago, I don't think that Professor Ronald Hutton was on the panel, and as you know, he's very into his spiritual. He lectures in witchcraft and paganism, and has done programs about tarot. So I'm sure he would look on it quite favourably. I
hope so. Unless is really into the toff and he doesn't like the RWS.
Yeah.
A Crowley devotee.
Like that. Simon, thank you so much. I'm just thanking everyone that's in chat. Jackie, thank you for being here. And Artemis, thank you very much. Hello to everyone that's joined us. Sorry I hadn't a chance to read everyone out, but Sandra, you're very welcome. It was a very enjoyable chat. So Simon, thank you so much. Hope you feel better soon, and see you at coffee and catch up tomorrow.
Will do. And thanks again, Richard.
Take care.
See you soon.
Have a good weekend. Bye.